Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome back to my Rebel, Reject, Create series of interviews about creativity. And today I'm joined by hip hop legend himself, Mr. Emile YX from the fairest Cape in South Africa. And we're going to be talking about not so much hip hop, but about creativity itself and that intersection with hip hop and how that's actually worked in his life. So, Emil, thanks so much for joining me, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm waking up, but I'm good. The weather in the north is not easy for someone from South Africa.
Yeah, I'm having that in the Netherlands as well, man. It's interesting. So, you started life, creatively speaking, as a b-boy,
Uh-huh.
but since then, I mean, you've performed as an MC, you've made movies, you've presented TV shows, you've written books, you're making documentaries, you've had a whole merchandise business, you've written and
Uh-huh.
published zines. Am I missing anything? I mean, you've done lots.
Yeah, and I think it's all just trying to constantly fill like some sort of gap. Like you see there's a space to do something, and you're like, just go for it.
Hmm.
And you mentioned b-boying at the beginning or breaking.
Yeah.
And that's actually what, for me, dancers have that ability to think and then do. So there's no, like, we don't spend, I mean, and now I'm older, I spend more time talking than I ever did in my life. But you have to show what you can do. And so you can't just like, you can't be in your head too long. You have to actually manifest the thought, the
Right.
idea. And so when I left, I mean, before I even left teaching, like my full-time gig, I was like at Batswood Primary, and I was like, how can I equal the amount of money I'm earning here with the stuff that I'm passionate about? And so I was like selling, like graffiti badges for matriculants, and I was like, oh, and then I started making T-shirts. I was like, oh, hey, cool. And then like, teachers weren't paid much back then. I was like, all right, I guess I can pull this off if I really wanted to.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You tell that particular story in detail in this amazing book that you've just published, Reconnect the String. Um, and I think this is something that maybe really bears repeating because I hear a lot from young creative people basically kind of complaining or not understanding why they're not making any progress. Like,
Mm.
how important is it to just start doing stuff?
Yeah, that is the most important thing. Like, I think the fear that goes, and I'm in a completely different world from what I've known. So I'm almost like restarting right
Yeah.
now. Like, I'm here, like at this age, right? And it's also like, there's so many more avenues, but so saturated. So I don't. I'm saying this because I don't want to make young people feel bad about like the amount of things that I've done, because it was a different time. Definitely like touring and being there physically and just showing, like, you could show and mess up and leave and nobody would know the difference, right? Now you open your mouth and like there's a camera on, there's like hundreds of people that are on recording and they can post it wherever they like.
Mm.
And so I understand that inhibition with young people these days. But it's I mean, we spend time with young people at schools back in South Africa where we try and get them away from that fear, like, step to the middle of the circle, say your name, lad. Who cares what they think? It's what they think is not what's important. So it wasn't that difficult for me to do that, because the b-boy step to the middle of the circle is already what we do.
Right. Right. So as a methodology, that was like, okay, so now I need to step up to a microphone. Well,
Yeah.
I'm just going to do it and see how it goes.
Yeah, but it's also no. I mean, there's a there's a thing about b-boying that also you practice at home, right? Like, what people don't see is me like trying like a million times to like spin in my head and like get the balance right, and like then you build your core. Like, all the moves are step by step uh, progression.
Mm.
So the same with rapping. I stood in front of the mirror like for hours. Like, if I mean, in the rhymes weren't the hard part actually. The part is between the songs, speaking to the crowd. Yo, that because because you even had to sound like it wasn't really scripted, right? So you had to be much more relaxed. And that's a difficult thing for someone who come from like the history that we come from, you know. And also people expect you to sound like the DJ. They don't expect you to sound like Awe Owen so who sit there. They don't expect that. So
cool.
yeah.
All right, thank you. If you're watching this, thanks so much for finding this video. Please hit the like button or leave a comment, or even better, hit the subscribe button. As I said at the beginning, this interview is part of a series that I'm doing with highly creative people from all sorts of disciplines and from all countries around the world. So if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, hit subscribe. There's going to be more coming up. Now, Emile, in your book, the Reconnect the String book, there is one chapter, which of course, as someone who's obsessed with creativity, it really grabbed me. And it's called Your Creativity is the Manifestation of Your God Self.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing for me is like an understanding of like what that power is, right? And like how do you make real that power in your daily life? Like, I mean, and I come from a religious background, so, and I work with a lot of kids in a community that is extremely religious, whether it's Islam or Christianity, or like here with my wife's family here, you know, Hindu community. So there's this constant, like, how do you make real what's inside of you? You know, how do you, and especially with like meditation also, like what am I, how do I heal myself while also expressing myself, you know? So it's like you are called to do something. And so what are you doing? Like, what are you called to do? Right. And so the do part of it is the actual creation, the manifestation of the creation, whether it's writing or conceptualizing ideas, or, you know, and that is who you, in my like opinion, is what you are sent to do, you know, to try and you can only find it by doing it, you know, like the contemplation or the try to escape from what your calling is, for me, is something that is like, it's an easy distraction these days, you know, and so for me, like that God self, the manifestation of, like, in the beginning was the Word and the Word was made man, is part of that, like how do you manifest you? And for me, again, as a dancer, like I think and I do, the word didn't even manifest, but the thought, you know, that created the word that manifests. That for me is how, like, a lot of the stuff that I've done came about, you know.
I wanted to pick out a sentence from that chapter where you wrote, "I believe that the power of creativity is the hidden reason that the learning and teaching arts have been removed from most government schools."
Yeah.
And I mean, this is where your and I's kind of approach on this really intersects. It's like, yeah, absolutely. I think if most people realized how creative they actually are, there's a lot of stuff we just wouldn't accept about the way our world works.
Exactly. And also I mean, like, again, go to the b-boy thing and the accountability. Like you got to show what you can do. Like, a politician can't come tell you he's going to do something and then he doesn't deliver. You're like, oh, hell no. We hold you accountable on your action, not on your talk. That's just talking. You're not delivering anything solid, you know. And so for me, like that embodiment of the creation is like has been my saving grace. A lot of people will say stuff like, yeah, that, you know, this guy's been in this group for like so many years, and then I see he left the group like 30 years ago and he's still complaining about what happened while he was in the group for a year, you know. And like, why? What have you done for the last 30 years? Was that the only space that you could be, you know, your authentic self? So it's about the action for me. It's about manifesting whatever your creative power was meant to be. And it's also like seeing being like, to quote Bruce Lee, being like water, right? Is to, like, whatever the container is, you fit into it, and to flow, go with the flow, you know. Like I teach kids breaking and they're like, now what? And they're like, okay, you battle each other. So they dance against each other in the class. They're like, can't we have a competition? And because of me being present with young people, it's like, okay, so now I create the competition. Then I look around like, there's an international competition. How to get these kids to travel to Germany,
Right.
you know? So it's constantly being like water and being open with ideas. And you know, like my sister taught me this, like to live with an open hand.
Yeah.
You know, because you can both receive and give. But a lot of people, they do this, they hold on and then they can't receive or give, you know. So for me, that is part of the creative energy anyway. You know, it's about sharing what you created with others, you know, and to not worry what TikTok or anyone else has to say about it.
Right.
To just keep creating and growing, you know.
Yeah. You know, I think what I often say is that for a lot of people, it's not so much that they don't know what to do, it's that they don't know how to start. And so the big question I get a lot of the time is like, okay, but how do I start? How do I start to embody? So you've had a lot of experience talking to kids. You've just referenced the workshops and stuff you've done. What's your like formula from going from thought to action?
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's the taking the step, right? And it's a very when you initially do it the first time, it's difficult. The more you do it, it's something you need to practice. The action you need to practice, right? And so I'll give you another example. I'm on a stage. This is Black Noise doing a show, and I look at the library across the road, and I'm like, yo, that's where they hide the lies. The kids all burst out laughing at the library, and I'm like, yeah, but our stories aren't being told there. We need to fix that. Like, you need to tell your story, write your story, and get it into the library. And then the kid, our meneer miskien 'n boek geskryf. I'm like, yeah, you got me. Like, I published something on my own, but not on that level, you know. And so for me, the key of the lesson is that I go and I come back and I show him that I did it, you know. And then, like, I learned from the interaction. So the teaching is completely different. The cyclic teaching. I'm sharing, they're sharing back with me, and I'm willing to grow, and then I share back with them. And when they got the book, the kid was like, yo, nah, the school was happy. They were like, yo, last time you were here, you spoke about it, now you showed us. Next time I came back, the kid was, yo, yeah. There were so many spelling and grammatical errors in that book. I was like, so why are you complaining? If you could spot that, then you can do the thing yourself. You know what I mean? So it's like those type of steps. And then also, like, in September, we're planning to tour, based on that very same history, tour libraries throughout the Western Cape to take a batch of books from people in the community to the library. You know what I mean? So it's like constantly seeing the opportunity to bring the change, and then finding opportunities to actually manifest that for other authors, and, you know, the economics that goes with it, obviously.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I like that, because that's like taking what is essentially a problem, right? That libraries are state-funded, centralized, and don't accommodate communities, and turning it into an opportunity by saying, okay, so how can we solve that?
Yeah, exactly. And also the decentralization of it, like, to also go to a school library, to also go to a community like Garage, where a guy has got like a group of like a set of books for kids, you know, just to realize that those spaces can be anywhere, actually, you know. So yeah.
So I want to ask you a question, because I get this one quite a lot, and I'd be interested to hear what your answer is. So obviously, I'm trying to get as many people as possible on the planet to be as creative as possible.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people turn around and say, well, that's insane, because if everyone was creative, like, who would do the actual work, and there's no way the world could run like that. What's your answer to that question?
That's how it was, as far as I'm concerned. You know, like, there's always going to be people who are going to be innovative in, like, a way that you require. Right? You're like, okay, I need for someone to, like, organize some food. They creative in, like, building, you know, whatever spaces where you can plant food and in houses or wherever, you know. So there's always this innovation that's based on creativity that can feed people. But then I would say, like, I'll bring, you know, like, I'll exchange a book for some food, or exchange some CDs or music, or maybe do a show, you know, maybe collectively I could draw the attention of people. So, you know, there's always this, like, exchange or barter system that we come from, you know. And I feel like that's the energy and the power that we are not realizing. We're not realizing that we have that power, that ability that could help you know, what our thought is very, like, supermarket. Our thought isn't like,
Right.
yo,
It's so limited, isn't it?
yeah, it's our thought needs to be like the person next door. And I've experienced that. I've experienced where I've gone to a gig and I'm like, yo, check out, I got these CDs with me. And there's other guy also doing a gig. He's like, yeah, let's just swap, man. So I didn't have to pay for his CD, or you know what I mean? Or like, okay, I'll give you these CDs and like a t-shirt and you give me a jacket, or you know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
it's a different value system that's connected to your creative ability, And I mean, even the money that people are like passing around, they take time to look at that design, like somebody or some artistic bra with that art is much more valuable than the actual piece of paper.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
so,
that's also so interesting. I mean, you've just mentioned money, which in itself is a creation, right? It's not even real. It's an agreement based on a perceived value, and it's like, so it's all creative anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly like with this cryptocurrency thing. I mean, it's just the belief of the people in the value of something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the clever thing about like how the systems actually devalued your ability to create your solutions, right? It's like it's cleverly like almost placed art and creation as like, don't do that. You're going to struggle the rest of your life. But in the meantime, that's exactly where the money is at, right?
That's it. Intellectual property requires creative thought. It requires new ideas. And that's where all the dominant forces of our society come from. Someone had a good idea somewhere and they built a system and entrenched it. And they don't want you to come with your idea and upset the apple cart.
I've done that a few times. They're like, yo, can we get some artist to speak on this like careers day? And so like they always put the artist last. So like I'm sitting there like this first, like people come up, at my company, they're like representing, Vodacom or whatever, another company, bank or something, and all these names, right? And at the end, like the kids get tired very quickly. So when they give me a chance, I'm like, yo, first of all, everybody that was on here is lying to you because they said my company. They don't own any shares in that company. They just work for that company. So when I say I own what I do as an artist, and they were like, oh, and then I broke down like the creation in the room. I was like, name one thing in this room. And it's always that guy, that exit guy. Like the first thing they spot is like, yo, that's the artist did that. And then someone says like the earrings, the spectacles, the jewelry, the person's t-shirt, the design of the school badge. And then just like everything, the chairs, the tables, Yeah. And then I asked that same question that I asked, like, if creation created all this, how come your parents tell you not to follow a creative path? Someone is making a lot of money off creation, and we getting sidelined to work for them. So,
I mean, you and I both kind of survived the music industry, on from two different spectrums. And then the thing about working in the music business that always astonished me was, for an industry that owed its survival to creativity, how rigid and boring and unflexible it always was.
Yep, exactly. And all of the rules and like what you can and can't do as an artist. And like a lot of artists, like if they were allowed to do what they did, they'd have survived easily. But the expectation of like, you can only have so many albums when you go take with you on tour. I've sold out of my bag more than I've ever like seen them sell on our behalf. You know what I mean? So it's like, and also just like the artist is present. He sees the reaction of the crowd. He sees the crowd want the product, and then he's like, "Yeah, you got to go to a store." Like, what? So yeah.
Well, that's not cool anymore. You got to change the way you've done that so that and they're too far removed.
Yeah, exactly.
It's this is the thing that really intrigues me, is that the people who are actually doing the work aren't allowed to be the people who come up with the ideas about how to make it better.
Yep, that's true. And I mean, and the thing about being on like most of my like best memories have been, and the book you held up is actually out of a book that I was initially writing called Making a Black Noise, which is like a 4-part. And the more I go, I went back to start writing it again. And I was like, oh man, there was another book within the book. So it's called A Colored for Life. So, So no, and I'm wanting to get it done before the museum launches in September, the hip hop museum in Joburg, and and all of those memories are based on touring, on being out performing, you know, in front of masses of people throughout the country, which is actually not really done anymore. People don't travel through the country and tour as they did before, you know, which is a powerful place to see your creative power, you know, and for the people to experience that creative power and the economics that goes with it. You know what I mean? So it's interesting how like all of like these big artists are like only on TV, like, you know,
Yeah.
you don't get to see them actually.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, I was very lucky to interview the first winner of the South African Idols, Heinz Winkler.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And you know, Heinz is he's a smart guy, man. Make no mistake. Whatever else you might think of him or his music, he's not an idiot, right? And I had a really good conversation with me, and he said, you know what was fascinating about Idols for me is I won with 1.5 million votes.
Oh, dope.
And when my album came out, the album came out 6 weeks later, we couldn't sell 10,000 copies
Mm-hmm.
because the attention had just moved on to
exactly.
the next thing.
Next thing, exactly. I mean, that's the thing about those shows is that never in that artist's life again will they ever have that amount of attention on them. You know, every week, like it's just that's impossible to ever get to that point again. You know.
Right. So it's just a big fat lie, those reality music shows.
It's masterfully done, and I was the worst person to have on one of those dance ones as well. I was like, they were like, "Oh man, stop giving away the secret." I was like, "Yo, I gotta tell these kids."
Yeah, you are. So Emile, what's the secret then? What's the if you were only allowed to tell an audience one thing about creativity and making the most out of their lives and the God power, what would you say?
As they step into it, like step into your creation, you know, like don't be afraid, just step into it. Start writing, start dancing, start creating, start drawing, you know, just do it. Like, you know, blog, whatever you want, like record, do it. Like you can always afterwards become better, but the first step is to do it. You know what I mean? And that is the key, to just step forward and get it done. Like that's the main thing, you know. And I think the more you do it, the less you care what people think after a while, because
that's true.
you're just having so much fun doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Emile, thanks a lot, man.
It's a pleasure.
And thanks to you for watching and listening. I'd love to hear what your favorite insights were from my discussion with Emile. So drop us a note in the comments and ask any questions you'd like, and we'll both come back and follow up and check out what's going on there, because we're both promising to be much better on YouTube.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, and if you're watching this and you think there's someone that you'd really like me to interview about their creative life or their creative methodology, throw that into the comments as well. And don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share, all those kind of buttons. And let's get as many people as we can onto this channel and rebelling, rejecting, and creating. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks, Emile.
Sure, man.